Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential, your weekly look at all things royal, brought to you from The Mail. I'm Luke Blackall, standing in for Joe Elvin, and there is lots to talk about today, from the scandal brewing over the new season of The Crown to the new interview from the Duchess of Sussex. Plus, we'll be looking at your comments and questions again. Here to help me dissect the latest news is Kate Mansey, assistant editor of The Mail on Sunday, and of course Richard Eden, the Daily Mail's diary editor. Welcome both. Let's now, though, kick things off with an interview given by the convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. Speaking to the Mail on Sunday, she described Prince Andrew as a dear friend. Kate, I can't imagine that he'll particularly welcome this compliment or endorsement.
Oh, it was a great. Thanks for plugging the Mail on Sunday. It was a great. It was a great hit. But you're right. There are some endorsements you just don't want, and I'm sure Andrew doesn't want to be reminded of his association with Ghislaine Maxwell and the late Jeffrey Epstein, of all people. So it would have come perhaps as a kind of an unwelcome compliment, I expect. But yes, she was very glowing in her praise of him from her prison cell. And yeah, she said that it was, unfortunate that Andrew had been dragged into it by his association with Epstein, and he remained a dear friend of hers. So you just don't want friends like those, unfortunately.
I think certainly not. Richard, there was also an interesting thing in this interview. She claimed that a very famous picture, which apparently shows Ghislaine looking on while Andrew poses with Virginia Roberts-Giuffre, one of Epstein's victims, it was actually a fake.
Yeah, I mean, this is that picture we've all become so familiar with. It's been on front pages for a long time. And what's interesting is, in the past, Ghislaine has said she thought it was genuine. In an email to the lawyer Alan Dershowitz, she said, yeah, she thought it was genuine. But since then, she said she's examined it closely and she had a real change of heart. She said she wouldn't go into details before her appeal, which is still coming up. But she said that she's identified at least 50 things wrong with this photograph. It's really interesting. We've heard some claims in the past about this. There's Lady Victoria Harvey, the socialite. She did a sort of investigation into alleged fakery, and there's been various theories. So, we wait to hear more, but in the examinations that newspapers such as the Mail have done, they've concluded that it was genuine. You can identify aspects of this Mews house in Belgravia. It was Jeffrey Epstein who took the photograph.
So it's just very important to stress, Kate, of course, that Andrew does, of course, deny any wrongdoing in his dealings and relations with all those involved. But he's never really going to escape his name being connected to this, is he?
This is the problem, isn't it? It's never really going to go away. We're going to have this big trial coming up, and we know, of course, that he's had to step down from his royal duties. He's lost all those kind of military honours. And we saw him in his civvies during the funeral, some of the elements to do with the Queen's funeral. And now it's just the headache of the King. So what do you do with Andrew, and what role can he possibly have? I remember two very senior members of the Queen's team, before she passed away, saying that the family really wanted to support him to find a way for a new life, kind of away from the public eye. And that now is Charles's challenge.
Quite a big challenge. That's something we'll definitely be touching on in future episodes. But Richard, I want to talk about another big interview that took place this week. The Sussexes speaking to the media again. Meghan talking to Variety magazine in the US. What stood out for you in that interview?
What stood out for me was just how much Meghan seemed to love it. This is Variety, known as the sort of Hollywood Bible. When she was an aspiring actress, or even when she, appeared in Suits, she could only dream of being on the cover of Variety. So there she is, posing, doing a photo shoot for the magazine in various outfits. And it was a sort of two-pronged interview, because she'd given it already, but then they came back and did a sort of second dose after the Queen's death. And it did make it rather awkward, because it sort of seemed that she was using the Queen's death to talk about her commercial projects, which the whole point of this interview is to promote her archetype series for Spotify. And yeah, extraordinary really. And then she talked about how the death had made her feel, and she said, oh, it was a very confusing time, I think was the phrase she used. Complicated, yeah. Sorry, rather confusing.
The Queen's death was very complicated.
Very complicated for them.
From her point of view, they were always going to ask that. How do you think she could have handled it in a different way? Is that what you're saying?
She certainly could have said, I'm not going to talk about Queen's death at all because I'm here to publicise my commercial projects, but maybe that would be unreasonable, and she paid fulsome tribute to the Queen. I mean, lots of it will have raised eyebrows because, you know, she talked about her relationship with the Queen, but there was no sense whatsoever of an apology for the hard times that she put the Queen through, the same as they did with Prince Philip, with their interviews, with their insults to the royal family, all these things leading up that led up to the Queen's death. So it will have, I think, been an interview that sort of left people with very mixed emotions.
It came, of course, at a time, Kate, when loads in the media are speculating when this DocuSeries, or reality show as some people are calling it, about the life with the Sussexes is coming out. We've heard conflicting reports this week. What's the latest as you understand it?
Well, my understanding is that it's all going ahead, and I think we can see from that interview that Meghan gave with Variety. She's also trying to distance herself a little bit from the Netflix docuseries. Now, we understand they've been paid vast fortunes. The sums vary depending which reports you read, but certainly a lot of money to take part in this docuseries, kind of fly on the wall about their life, about their love story. And there's a very famous, I gather, director, Liz Garbus, who's in charge. And during this latest interview, Meghan seemed to distance herself from it, saying, well, you know, it's their project and we're happy to be involved with it, rather than kind of taking full ownership. So I wonder whether there'll be some interesting points in there. I mean, it's going to be fascinating viewing, isn't it, no matter what you think of the Sussexes.
Absolutely. Rich, what can we expect? I mean, do you think there's already a distancing going on?
I mean, I was nervous about this, you know, reality show anyway, but my goodness, this really it makes me nervous because she's clearly putting clear water, or trying to, between her and Harry. But look what's happening. It's extraordinary. They signed this multi-million-dollar deal with Netflix. What have we seen so far? Nothing. There was the animated series, which was announced, and then that was axed. We have the series all about the Invictus Games, which was formally announced, but we haven't seen yet. It hasn't been broadcast. Both of those projects were sort of made by Archwell in conjunction with Netflix. But now the first thing we're going to see is entirely a Netflix production about them, which they are keen to distance themselves from. And let's be clear why, because it looks like it's going to be awful for the royal family. There's going to be lots of negative stuff, which they want to be able to say, look, that's just Jane Garbus's vision. That's nothing to do with us. We wouldn't have made it that way, as Meghan put it this week. So I think it's very alarming.
And that makes me think that the timing, it won't be delayed, because they're now distancing themselves. Or how could you do this so soon after the Queen's death? Well, then they can say, well, hang on, you know, this was their decision, it's Netflix's decision. If you're paying a lot of money to people to take part in a documentary series, you're going to have some control over when it comes out. And this is the season, isn't it? Particularly, well, we see it in the UK, but definitely in America, the fall seasons when all the big shows come out. And it's such a big kind of television watching time that one would be surprised if they didn't come out around this sort of time. But
And let's be clear, it's about money and, you know, algorithms, that Netflix wants to promote it. When people, the millions around the world, have enjoyed the new series of The Crown, they want to be able to say, you might also want to watch
also by Netflix,
Harry and Meghan's new series.
Absolutely.
And they did that before with that awful programme where it was Diana in her own words, which is what upset the royal family so much, because that was images of Diana using her own voice in recordings she never dreamed would be made public. And it was a programme based on that, an old programme, which they broadcast immediately after The Crown, and that it did so much damage.
Well, it's, again, we've said it before on this show, it's going to be a fascinating autumn ahead of us, really, with all these. We've had the books coming out, we've had all this, but we'll be following it closely on this show, of course. Kate, just a quick word on this interview that the Duchess of Sussex has done. She didn't name Harry during it, but she just referred to my husband 7 times. What do you make of the way she spoke to this journalist?
Well, we're having a fun chat about this before we came on air. I think that's actually how you would see the King speak about the Queen Consort. He doesn't say, you know, my Queen Consort, and he doesn't say Camilla. It's very rare that you would hear that, but he often would say my wife. Certainly with the Queen Consort, she wouldn't refer to the King quite so much as my husband. And when you do talk to them kind of privately, they will talk about my husband or my wife. And everybody knows, of course, who we're talking about. And Meghan, again, she will know that everybody will know who she's talking about, with her having to actually say Harry, or, Has, as she's called him in the past, her nickname for him.
H.
Or has.
Yeah,
it changes.
I must say, it does relegate him to the background a bit, though, because, we've seen it this week with more, big stories from her Archetypes series, which, when they announced that for Spotify, it was very much Harry and Meghan. They did a joint programme. But instead, we've seen it's just her doing her show, with Harry not involved at all.
The irony is, of course, that, it's the royal family and her connection to him as to why, they want people, particularly in America, want to hear all about the funeral. They want to hear about the royal family, and here's an opportunity they would hope to learn more of that world. The reason why people watch Palace.
Indeed. Again, lots more to talk about there. We have some of your comments to look at now. Please keep these coming. Really enjoy them. Taylor writes in praise of the new Princess of Wales, saying, Catherine, Princess of Wales, was not born into royalty, yet she has risen to the challenge beautifully. She proves her royalty by her actions, loyalty to the monarchy, and strength of character. Thank you, Taylor. Min Doc, meanwhile, writes from Bombay on the subject of our discussion about the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond, whether it will be used for King Charles's coronation. Had a chat about that last week. Look up that show if you missed it. Min Doc writes, I am an avid viewer and love your show and the discussions you all have. As an Indian, I'm happy to see the Koh-i-Noor stay where it is. It's looked at and appreciated by tens of thousands of people every year. It is a great source of pride for me that it adorns the heads of royalty. Here it would be relegated to a museum and not used at all. As for the coronation, I'd like to see them go to the whole hog with pomp and circumstance and pageantry. In my opinion, it will bring in millions, if not billions, of tourist dollars, which will be more than offset the cost of the coronation. So I think Mindoc agreeing with your position there, Richard. Sticking with the coronation now, Suzanne Tevlin writes with her support of Richard's idea for a contest to design the King's new clothes. Suzanne says, I love the idea of a design competition for the robes, Richard. Could all Commonwealth artists take part? I'm in with bells on, no bells on the robes though, I promise. I mean, to be fair, Richard, if they had robes, the bells on the robes, you'd know when the king was coming, wouldn't you? You'd all stand up ready because you could hear him jingling down the hall.
True. The key thing is we want colour, don't we? We want lots of colour. And we had that from the Queen's coronation through all the ermine and the Lord's robes. So it's just horrific, the idea of a load of dull suits.
I think there will be. I mean, Charles does love the kind of pageantry. So when I write about it being kind of slimmed down and, much cheaper, I don't think they're going to be doing away with the kind of, some of the everything that one would expect from such a historic occasion.
This is a good point. I mean, we didn't make it to the script because we have so much to talk about this week, but you did write at the weekend about coronation and some of the things that we can expect Charles to be doing. What can you tell us that you've heard so far from discussions?
Well, there's a couple of academics who've been studying this for a long time, and what's fascinating about them is that they've got access to Lambeth Palace, the palace, and the government, the kind of that golden triangle, and they're really in the know. And so they've been putting together kind of guidelines and advising and helping and that sort of thing. So they're saying that it'll go from sort of 8,000 people who were there for the Queen's coronation right down to 2,000 people, because they had these stalls and kind of scaffolding effectively up at Westminster Abbey for the Queen's coronation. So they were crammed to the rafters with all sorts of dignitaries and aristocrats. And they actually had soldiers go on before the coronation and just stamp down, just run up and down on these things to make sure that it was, secure. And so all the planning and all that sort of stuff is fascinating, but we're just not going to have that scale again.
Would never get past health and safety
Would
these days.
I was thinking that.
I mean, you don't want to lose an aristocrat in the melee of it all.
Exactly.
But you did also say that some of the, senior people, lords and ladies, may have to enter a ballot to even get a ticket this time.
Well, last time you had all the hereditary peers. Well, the system has changed quite significantly since then. And I think now you're going to have, it's been told to me that you'll have these ballots where only a few of those sorts of people will go. And taking up the empty places will be people from charities and, more ordinary folk, if you like, and a much more diverse background, not just lots of, rich white people.
It should be an absolutely fascinating spectacle, and I hope they'll be watching, and so we do want some pageantry here, a good bit of colour here on Palace, and our viewers do too. Let's turn now to The Crown versus The Crown. Series 5 of the Netflix blockbuster is back in just a matter of weeks, and it's already upsetting some of those around the real royal family. Kate, this season, with its focus on Charles and Diana, was always going to be controversial. You were writing, again, busy weekend of writing for you this weekend. It seems it's upsetting not only friends of the royal family, former prime ministers, and today Dame Judi Dench has stepped into the fray. Tell us what you know. That's
right. I mean, I've been able to see the first 4 episodes of the new series, and it's very close to home. We're getting very close to the current day now, and there's real concern among the King's friends, who have been saying that, you know, they would want people to have a disclaimer. They would want Netflix, first of all, to have a disclaimer to make it very, very clear, not necessarily to viewers here, but people watching abroad who might think that this is some sort of based very much on what happened, when it's completely fictionalised. Yes, that, you know, the story, the bones of the story are there, but all the dialogue's manufactured. Lots of the incidents are manufactured. There's time zones which have moved backwards and forwards. So they're saying they want a disclaimer, and they're also calling on people to boycott it. And say, don't watch it, don't give them, you know, the publicity, because they're furious. And Charles is played by Dominic West. I mean, you've got award-winning actors here who, very convincing, you know, huge scripts. And as it was described to me by one very senior friend of the King's, that it's trolling on a Hollywood budget. And that's what you're seeing. It's slick, it looks magnificent, but Charles is presented as a kind of callous, you know, horrible, kind of feckless husband. It plays to the script to make it very dramatic, that he's the baddie, Diana's the goodie, and that's how it was. And there'll be some people who believe that, and that's the danger.
Richard, the timing couldn't really be worse for a man who's trying to sort of step out of his mother's shadow, cement his own reputation, create his own image, is there really?
It's awful, because it's really focusing on the lowest, you know, the worst part of his life, just at a time which should be the start of a happy period, really, of being king. Yes, his mother's died, but it's a new start, and then instead it's dragging all this up again, you know, leading up to the tragic death of Diana. So it's going to be grim, and I think it's just sort of got to grin and bear it. I mean, God, it said so much that Dame Judi Dench, who played Queen Elizabeth I, she won an Oscar for that in Shakespeare in Love. You know, she's not someone who courts controversy. She never really says anything controversial, but she wrote a letter to the Times making clear she thought it was tasteless, and calling for what the Mail on Sunday has done, which is this disclaimer, just to make clear that it's fictional.
And John Major said the same thing, saying that it's malicious. There's a scene in the new series in which Charles is essentially lobbying the then Prime Minister, John Major, and saying to him, well, you know, isn't it time for the Queen to go, effectively? And John Major's office told us last week that it was all malicious, and there's no, you know, it's false, it's made for drama. But is that the way that we should be looking at real people's lives?
Absolutely. Now, Kate, look, the official line is Charles doesn't watch it. We've heard this before in previous series. But he'll be aware of what's going on, won't he? I mean, there's enough people around him seemingly upset by this for him to be in the know. Absolutely.
I'm sure he's being briefed on what's in it. But I can't imagine he would want to watch it, knowing that what it's about. I mean, I don't even like watching myself back on television. I certainly wouldn't want to watch somebody portraying me in a negative fashion. So it's just, but toe curling. I mean, there'll be lots of people in the palace who haven't. And this is another thing, you know, journalists have watched preview copies like me, but people in the palace haven't even been given that courtesy, that they don't even have the kind of preview to have a little watch before the rest of the world watches it. And it's so strange to think that that's, you know, Netflix, which is now doing a big deal, as we've spoken about with the Sussexes. It's all very strange.
Well, the royal family, sorry, I was just going to say, the royal family hasn't really been in this position before, because when it's a British broadcaster, they'd always be very careful. They'd be wary of upsetting the royal family, and they would show them basic courtesies. But, you know, it's an American broadcaster, but which is watched by millions of people in Britain. So it's a new environment, new media that we're dealing with, and very difficult for that reason.
I was told last week, I don't think this went into my piece, but at the beginning, they came to the palace and said, look, we're doing this big thing, and, you know, maybe you could help us, or we'd show you some scripts. And a couple of the advisors said, yes, let's do it. But then there was a lot of discussion, and the end result was, we can't get involved with this project because it is drama, it is fiction, and then it will look like we've endorsed everything within it. So they had that kind of fork in the road moment and went that way. And also, that starting a long time ago with the young Queen, it was in the sort of not so distant past, really, but, you know, not what it is today, right up to the 1990s is what they're covering, the early 90s. And they chose not to take part or collaborate, and I think perhaps that was the right thing to do. The downside now, of course, is that they don't have any control and they don't know what's in it, and it's just a runaway thing. It's just they're already filming Series 6, so the following series. And is that going to be the final one? You know, you never know. It's such a money spinner for them. Why would they ever stop?
Given the real-life drama we've seen in the last 3 years, at least, you know, it's going to be very, very busy.
There's no shortage of material, is there?
Absolutely no shortage of material. Richard, just quickly, the fact that this Netflix show has been so dismissed by royals puts Harry's relationship with Netflix into question, doesn't it?
Oh, I mean, can you imagine? He's accepted millions from this company which is doing this. I mean, that's not going to help his relations with the royal family, but it's worse than that. You might remember the interview which Harry gave to his mate James Corden, and in there he actually talked up the Crown. He said, oh, it's not too far from reality, you know, and it gives one side of things. It's as if he wanted to help Netflix by saying that, so it really is bad.
Just another quick question before we get to your questions. You've written today that the royal family have a new representative, and it's the Queen's ex-husband.
I thought this was a lovely touch. Was Andrew Parker Bowles, the Queen Consort's first husband. He actually carried out a royal engagement. It was attendance at a funeral on behalf of the Queen. So that was listed in the court circular, the official record of royal engagements, as the Queen Consort was represented by Andrew Parker Bowles. Now, who knows if it's going to be a one-off or not? It was a funeral of a cousin of his, as well as relation of the Queen Mother's. But friends have said that he's happy to carry out other duties if he's asked to. And I think the main thing it shows for me is how you know, Camilla enjoys a warm relationship with her ex-husband, and that's very positive, a sign of their maturity, really.
It's all very modern. Now, let's answer a couple of your questions now. Walter Backer writes, would there be any foreign royals in attendance at the coronation? Perhaps not reigning kings or queens, but maybe crown princes and princesses. Richard, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm sure there'll be loads. You know, it'll be crammed with royals. I think you'll expect a similar sort of congregation to what we had at the Queen's funeral, really. You'll have heads of state. I mean, I would expect Joe Biden to be there again, from all around the world, as well as the foreign royals in their prominent places.
Wrench Doozer, meanwhile, asks this: will there be a shuffle of who lives in royal properties? Do those leases have a provision where they can be voided with notice when there is a change in the sovereign, or will King Charles have to wait until those leases expire? Kate, you know more about royal games of homes than almost anyone, I think. What can you tell us?
Well, we do have leases. So Prince Andrew has a lease on Royal Lodge. He was allowed to stay in Royal Lodge after the Queen Mother died for a certain amount of time, and that's still got some time to run. It's important to say. The terms of the lease, he had to spend several millions actually refurbishing it when he first moved in, which he did do. So he has the right to remain. The problem comes with refurbishment now. So there are leases and tenants within the royal family. Prince Andrew is an example at Royal Lodge, where he lives with his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson. And when they first took over the estate, essentially, it's huge. When the Queen Mother died, he was given a tenancy of several decades, and it's still got some time to run, which is important to note. The terms of the lease were that he had to spend several £1 million refurbishing it when he first moved in. He did that. And so he has the right to remain. But will that all change with King Charles? Now Charles is on the throne, things might be renegotiated, and there could be another place for him to go, or it might be a perfect place for the Prince and Princess of Wales, for example, who are now obviously, their children are in school in the area. So things are up for, things could change.
Things could change, and it's something, definitely do watch this space. We've had lots of questions about that, including from Shannon Dumalt and others. We'll try to cover that in more detail soon in a future episode, I promise. Finally, Violetta Kalayan writes, "Hello Daily Mail Royals, you asked for questions, here is ours. Why can't you have a full hour broadcast? We don't get enough of Richard. Yes, we're the ones who want to adopt him." Now, Violetta, I am very happy for you to adopt Richard. That's absolutely fine by me, but the hour-long show may be a step too far. I will, however, give it some thought and discuss it with the team. We really do love hearing from you. Please keep those questions and comments coming in. You can write to us on social media. You're at Mail Plus. You can leave comments below, or you can email us at palace@mailplus.co.uk. Montage time now, and we'll leave you with some pictures of royals wearing their finest jewels. That will take you to the end of the programme. My thanks to Kate Mansey, Richard Eden, and to you for watching. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.